Picture this. It's New Year's. You're with your friends. You're partying. You're having a great time. But it's time to go, so you walk home alone. You're scared. It's Los Angeles. It's dangerous. But you're not worried. A white car pulls up next to you and offers to give you a ride home. But the man in the car looks nice. He's well put together. You're drunk, so you reluctantly say yes. But he says he has to stop back at his house first. He begins to argue with whoever else is in the house. You begin to get even more worried. Your heart's racing. You don't know what to do. But then you hear his footsteps. He's walking back towards the car. He looks at you and he says, "Your body, discarded in the trash, for no one to ever see you again." The man who committed these crimes? Lonnie Walker, also known as the Grim Sleeper. He was a serial killer and rapist whose crimes dated from 1985 through 2007. Walker murdered 11 people and attempted to murder another. All of the victims were black women, as well as one minor, all from Los Angeles. He was known as the Grim Sleeper because he took a 14-year hiatus in between two of his crimes. Although it is believed that he committed many more crimes than the ones that he was indicted for. Like I said before, the Grim Sleeper's crime took place during a 30-year time span, but with most of his crimes being committed throughout the late and mid-1980s. The investigation began for the Grim Sleeper once LAPD officers started to find bodies of young women in the trash in the back of alleyways. They originally called him the Southside Slayer. But LAPD officers knew that it would be hard to put a face to the crimes. There were so many serial killers murdering women in Los Angeles during the 1980s, and it's hard for detectives to link specific murders to specific people when so many murders are happening. After his hiatus, Lonnie Franklin came back for more. His thought-to-be last victim was Janisha Peters, a 26-year-old from South Los Angeles. The discovery of Janisha's body changed things for LAPD officers. The officers and detectives had finally found DNA. There was DNA from the Grim Sleeper underneath Janisha's fingernails. In 2009, Los Angeles detectives linked Janisha Peters' DNA and case to several other crimes committed throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. This led to the formation of the 800 Task Force, a police task force assigned on finding and capturing the Grim Sleeper. In that same year, the LA Weekly released an interview with the only known survivor of the Grim Sleeper, Anitra Washington. Anitra Washington described the Grim Sleeper as a nice, nerdy, polite, and well-put-together black man. She described his car as a white Ford Pinto with an orange racing stripe going down the hood. She also described the interior of his car as being fancy and having a marble gear shifter. Washington also stated one chilling fact, that Franklin would take Polaroid photos of his victims and then show them to them before he murdered them. After the LA Weekly's interview with Anitra Washington, 3 more age-enhanced sketches of the Grim Sleeper were released. There was also a $500,000 bounty put on the Grim Sleeper. Police have been unable to find an exact match between DNA found at crime scenes associated with the Grim Sleeper and any of the profiles in California's DNA profile database. Instead of continuing to look for the exact DNA match to the Grim Sleeper, law enforcement decided to look for the most similar DNA to that found at the crime scene of the Grim Sleeper. This led to Franklin's son Christopher. Law enforcement knew that Christopher was not the suspect they were looking for, as he was too young, so this led them to his dad, Lonnie Franklin. An undercover police officer pretended to be a waiter at where Lonnie Franklin ate, and collected some of his leftover pizza crust. The DNA found on the pizza crust matched the saliva DNA left on one of the victim's breasts. Lonnie Franklin immediately became a suspect. Franklin had been a mechanic in Los Angeles from 1981 until 1989. His house was in a 1.5-mile radius of all 12 victims. After a familial DNA test on Franklin's son, the police knew they had their guy. Law enforcement missed many opportunities to catch Franklin because his DNA wasn't collected for multiple years. In 2004, he was convicted of a felony and was serving 3 years of supervised probation. But also in 2004, voters approved of Proposition 69, which stated that DNA must be collected for all people charged with a crime, but it also required the expansion of the DNA database. With this expansion of the DNA database, Franklin was never recorded because his parole officer wasn't really supervising him. He was really on unsupervised probation. His DNA was never collected and it never entered the system. Probation officers did not collect DNA samples from people that are on unsupervised probation between the periods of November 2004 and 2005. So that's why Franklin's DNA was never collected. On July 7, 2010, Franklin was arrested at his home. There were over 180 photographs of young women recovered at Franklin's home. The police had done their job. They caught the right guy. Franklin was facing 10 plus counts of murder and 10 plus counts of rape. The trial was delayed multiple times and didn't begin until February of 2016, 6 years after he was arrested. The closing arguments to the trial began on May 2nd of 2016, and the jury began deliberating 2 days after that on May 4th. The jury convicted Franklin on all counts on May 5th of the same year, and a month later, on June 6, 2016, the jury recommended that Franklin should be sentenced to death. Although Franklin was never put to the death penalty, he was found unresponsive in his cell in 2020 and passed away at the age of 67. Although Lonnie Franklin is dead, his wrath still rages on. Many of the girls and young adults that were found in the trash cans and alleyways of South Los Angeles in the late 80s have been unidentified. It's sad to say, but it's thought that Lonnie Franklin had over 30 cases of assault, rape, and murder. He took the lives of many innocent young girls, and those victims were Deborah Jackson, 29, Henrietta Wright, 35, Barbara Ware, 23, Bernita Sparks, 25, Mary Lowe, 26, Larisha Jefferson, 22, Alicia Alexander, 18, Bartholomew, 15, Valerie McCorvey, 35, and Janisha Peters, 25, and it is suspected that he had 20 plus more victims.